Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the Procurement Act 2023 Procurement Reform webinar. My name is Gillian. I'm your host for this morning's session. So we are just checking that you're in the right place and that you have come to hear about procurement reform. If you wanted to hear about something else, there's lots of other webinars to choose from on the Go for Growth events list. So, but hopefully you're in the right place for this morning. We'll do some introductions in a second, but as I said, I'm Gillian Askew. I'm one of the co-founders of Go for Growth. I will be hosting this morning's session along with Lauren from Go for Growth, who will be keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A functions for us. And we're delighted to be joined by Anna Stapley from the contracts team at YPO. Morning, Anna. Morning, Lauren.
Morning.
And we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping, and then I will ask Anna and Lauren to do some proper introductions. Just to let you know that the session is being recorded today, so a copy of the recording along with a copy of the slides will be sent out to all registered attendees. And we usually aim to do that within 48 hours of the session. We do have time set aside for Q&A at the end, but do feel free to put into the Q&A function throughout the session. We'll answer them as we go if we can. If for any reason we do run out of time to answer them after the event, and we'll include the answers in the email that we send out to everybody. Also, there is a chat function on Zoom. If you've used Zoom before, please do feel free to say hi and introduce yourself should you wish to. Just make sure that you say whoever you want to see it, which I think the choices are everyone or hosts and panelists only. And we do have a good blend today of people who are in current positions or are commissioned, and we have some who are registered as well. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. You can see on screen that we'll be covering a number of things today in our session about procurement reform. We'll be highlighting some of the key changes and how businesses can prepare for the Act as it comes into this year. And we'll also give an overview from both YPO and from Go for Growth on what help and support is available to providers. So before we move on, my name is Gillian Askew. I'm a procurement person by trade, 30 years nearly in, so 12 spent in public sector, 18 in private sector, and I co-founded Go for Growth 4 years ago to try and support both the marketplace and procurement to help navigate the complex world of public procurement. I'll talk a little bit more about how we do that later. Lauren, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, so I'm Lauren from Go for Growth. I tend to deal within Go for Growth, provider one-to-one support. So if you are to come and speak to us following the event, I'll probably be your first port of call. You'll see that I'll be the one sending the follow-up email. So if you do have any questions following the event, please don't hesitate to get in touch. I'll be more than happy to assist.
Thank you, Lauren. And Anna, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So hello, everyone. And once again, thank you for joining today's session. My name is Anna Stapley. I am Contracts Officer at YPO. And my team's responsibility is to oversee compliance on all YPOs and YPO's external and internal procurement. So public contract regulations and soon to be the Procurement Act is pretty much our Bible, and the regime underpins all our tendering activity, and we refer to the regulations on a daily basis pretty much. And as many public sector buying organizations, we are preparing ourselves for the upcoming changes. So we are trying to upskill ourselves by participating in various training opportunities and doing as much research as we can pretty much. So hopefully this knowledge can be then passed down to our customers and suppliers. Hence, we have this session today, which is going to be hopefully one of many, and I hope you'll find it useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I did just say in the chat as well that my voice is breaking up, so I'm being battered by Storm Aisha, or it could be Jocelyn. I'm not sure which storm it is that's battering me at the minute. So Lauren or Anna, if my voice starts going, can you just give me a sign, and I'll try and do something with it. I did get a note to say I had an unstable connection, but it seems okay at the minute. Do just let me know. Hopefully it will be fine. So if we think about the background to this, so you might know this if you've been in procurement, this might be familiar to you, but it might not. So the first advisory panel was held October 2019. The green paper that was entitled Transforming Public Procurement was released in December 2020, and that document laid out vision and proposals for overhauling the UK's public procurement regulations post our exit at Europe, the European Economic Union. And consultation ran until May 2021, and both procurement and the provider marketplace had to enter into that consultation. After the consultation period, the government reviewed the feedback and published its response. The proposed justice based on the input it was received, and that happened in December 2021. And a procurement bill was announced in the Queen's Speech of May 22 and then introduced into the House of Lords. The bill completed the law stage on the 13th of December 2022 and it entered the Commons on the following day. On October the 26th, the bill received royal and became the Procurement Act of 2023. So what happens from here? You can see a link on the bottom of this slide. This was taken from the Mills and Reeve procurement portal. But effectively, what we've got coming next or what we had in November was the government knowledge drop. So they've started to land their on-demand video resources, providing an overview of the changes in the Act. Next month, we're expecting official policy notes to be published, and then straight after in March, the secondary legislation, we're expecting that to be finalised and therefore laid before procurement. In March, also, we're expecting the government self-guided e-learning product to be launched. So that comprises of 10 one-hour modules with a skilled practitioner certification. And lots of public sector colleagues that we talk to are talking about the becoming a skilled practitioner and going through that certification. And then we have the community practice launched come May 20, reflection into the changes that the regime is making. And then in October this year, we're expecting the Procurement Act to come into force, potentially in successive stages. We might not get everything go live in October 2024, and we'll see how that goes as they are dropped out. So we're going to take each of these, relatively speaking, in order. So we're going to bidding process and enhanced transparency. We're going to talk through meat versus mat. If you don't know what they are, I'll explain it when we'll look at supply performance and contract management. We'll talk through the central digital platform, and we'll also think about dynamic markets and frameworks. And Anna, if I can hand over to you to cover the bidding process and transparency for us.
Yeah, of course. So as Jill mentioned already, one of the key areas to be affected is going in the Procurement Act is going to be the bidding process. So the number of procedures available decreased significantly, which relates pretty much to the idea of this idea of cutting red tape and reducing the overall number of regulations. So currently in Public Contract Regulations 2015, there are 6 procedures, 7 if you are counting design contest, under which contracting authorities can procure goods, services and works. And if you look at the slide, new regulations offer only 3 procedures. So let's start with the most popular procedure, which is open. Under the Procurement Act, it remains largely the same. This procedure on the Procurement Act is also called competitive tendering procedure. It still remains a single stage process where there is no restriction on the number of submissions. It is very likely that contracting authorities will run approximately 90% of their procurements using this process, especially at the early stages of the new Procurement Act, where we are pretty much still unfamiliar with how the regulations should work in real practice. So probably contracting authorities will prefer to stick to something they know already. The next available procedure on the Procurement Act is competitive flexible procedure, which pretty much replaces all other procedures on the Public Contract Regulations 2015. And these procedures are restricted, competitive procedure with negotiation, competitive dialogue, and innovation partnership, including design contests. So flexible procedure basically means that contracting authorities can make up their own rules as to how procure goods, services, or works, as long as they meet minimum requirements relating to notice publication and timescales. And unlike open procedure, flexible procedure must be at least 2 stages. Contracting authorities can include more stages if needs be. And this procedure will also allow you to establish dynamic market, which is an equivalent of current dynamic purchasing system. So as you can see, all those procedures are now condensed into one. So when we had slightly different rules for each one of them on the current regime, now contracting authorities from October, will have a lot more flexibility in running their procurements. And last but not least, we have something called direct award, which is going to replace negotiated procedure without prior publication. So direct award basically means that contracting authorities can award a contract to a supplier without engaging in any prior competitive process. And both negotiated procedure without prior publication and direct award can only be used in special circumstances. And the list of justifications for using direct award is listed in Regulations 41 to 43 in the Procurement Act. And those justifications will include, for example, protection of life, prototypes and development, when there is single supplier on the market, when you are buying additional or making repeated purchases, procurements of commodities, insolvency, urgency, user choice contracts, and defense and security. So these grounds are pretty much similar to those stated under the current regime, but clearly the new addition here is user choice contracts, where service user can choose the supplier. For example, a person receiving a care service can use their supplier, which is their carer. Another difference between current and new regime is transparency notices. So for negotiated procedure without prior publication, we have something called VEET notice, which is an equivalent of transparency notice under the Procurement Act. So publishing VEET notice for negotiated procedure without prior publication was not mandatory. Well, under new regime, in most cases, when making a direct award, contracting authorities must publish transparency notice. In a similar manner, we have a standstill period, which is mandatory, which is not mandatory, when publishing VEET notice, but when we are publishing transparency notice, minus some exemptions, like direct award to protect life, observing standstill period will be mandatory. Can we move on to the next slide, Joe? Thank you. Okay, so now a little bit more about transparency and notices themselves. So unlike Public Contract Regulations 2015, the new Procurement Act does not actually explicitly state transparency. Instead, transparency is demonstrated on the new notice obligations regime, and it will span the full life cycle of the procurement. So contracting authorities who are running their own procurement process will be now required to publish more notices than ever at every single procurement stage. And this includes market pre-engagement and contract management. So the idea here is that all notices that you see on the screen will be published on a single digital platform. So suppliers and contracting authorities have access to all this information in one place. So looking at the table on the screen, we have 5 notices on the left and 13 notices on the right. So as you can see, much more information is going to be made publicly available. And as I mentioned before, new regulations aim to focus on the life cycle of the procurement as a whole, and they emphasize transparency rather than there isn't no more that much focus on discrimination, preventing discrimination of suppliers outside of the UK, or rigid award procedures. So most of these notices will find their equivalent version in Public Contract Regulations 2015. However, what is completely new are notices in bold. So if we take a closer look at those, and if we start with the pipeline notice, so once every financial year, contracting authorities must publish pipeline notices, which will set out information about any public contract contracting authorities are planning to tender for, with an estimated value of more than 2 million. So this pretty much means better visibility of potential upcoming work for suppliers. The next notice we've got is a brand new notice, is preliminary market engagement notice. So if contracting authority carries out or intends to carry out market engagement, then it must publish a notice to that effect before tender notice is published. And the notice will either state that contracting authority is going to engage in the market research or has already done so. The next notice we've got here, which is also brand new, is payments compliance notice. And for this one, once every reporting period, contracting authority must publish payments compliance notice setting out information about the contracting authority's compliance with the requirement to pay supplies within 30 days. And we also have contracts performance notice. So this one applies where a contracting authority has set key performance indicators, and at least once every 12 months during the life cycle of the contract and on termination of the contract, the contracting authority must assess performance against those KPIs and publish information in relation to that assessment. So once again, there will be a lot of detailed information available on a single digital platform, and the idea is pretty much to track the contract span throughout those publications. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. That's great. So meat versus mat. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Meat versus mat. What does it mean? So meat stands for most economically advantageous tender. Most advantageous tender. My personal opinion is it shouldn't cause too many issues, certainly not for buyers or suppliers, because it's more of a terminology shift really than a real substance shift. But meat focuses primarily on economic factors such as cost and price. It might also consider other criteria. It typically, as you would see in any procurement today, involves a structured evaluation process that assigns specific weightings to various evaluation criteria, including price, quality, technical capability, and also environmental considerations. Bidders are scored against their performance against the criteria, and the contract is awarded to the bidder with the highest overall score. And meat aims to strike a balance between economic factors and other relevant considerations to ensure best value for money. MAT takes a broader view of advantages of benefits, including social and environmental, and is not limited to leading with economic factors. So it considers a wider range of criteria and qualitative aspects, including technical expertise, innovation, and sustainability and social considerations. So the evaluation process is exactly the same for most advantageous tender. It will continue to utilise a structured evaluation process that will assign specific weightings to various evaluation criteria. But what we expect to see under MAT is higher weightings for non-economic or cost-related aspects. And MAT aims to select the tender that provides the most advantages overall, which may or may not be the lowest cost option. If you're at the minute, if you are answering procurements, you'll already be seeing some of this shift between meat and MAT. So you'll already be seeing higher weightings for quality, higher weightings for social value, for example, and lower weightings for cost. Procurement is not designed to be a fastest race to the bottom ad infinitum. It is about finding the best possible value.
Just to add on top of what you just said, Joe, I think that we may also expect some contracting authorities not evaluating cost aspect at all, especially when pricing is hard to evaluate, can be compared like for like, or like even for PSBOs like YPO, when we establish frameworks for our customers to use, who may often have different requirements. I think we're going to see that change where pricing is not going to be evaluated at all for those reasons. So it's going to be all on quality and social value aspect.
And I think you're absolutely right. We are seeing some of those coming out where in DPSs or approved provider lists, the pricing isn't necessarily being tested in the most traditional way. But thank you, Anna, that's a good point. What I will say before we get into supplier performance and contract management is this is a huge topic. We definitely won't be doing it justice today. We are thinking that we'll dedicate an entire webinar to supplier performance and contract management, hopefully supported by YPO. So if you keep an eye on our social platforms, we'll let you know when that will be. It is a huge topic, and I guess every buyer would agree that the devil's in the detail in contract management, and that's where the battles are effectively won and lost in terms of supplier performance. But we're going to run through a few things today. So excluded and excludable suppliers is one of the topics. So the Act distinguishes between excluded and excludable suppliers. So an excluded supplier is one that cannot participate in procurements or win public contracts except for in very limited cases. Whereas an excludable supplier, on the other hand, can be excluded from procurements at the discretion of a public body concerned. There continues to be mandatory and discretionary exclusion grounds as there are today. So the Act sets out mandatory and discretionary grounds for exclusion, and mandatory are those which necessitate the exclusion of a supplier from a procurement process, such as things like involvement in criminal activities like theft or corporate manslaughter. That's the same today for mandatory exclusion grounds. Discretionary grounds provide authorities with the flexibility to exclude a supplier based on factors like previous poor performance, professional misconduct, or potential competition infringements. Some of those things are already in existence in discretionary exclusions, some are not. And there will be an assessment criteria, so authorities must assess whether the circumstances that give rise to exclusion grounds are likely to occur again. That involves considering the seriousness of the event or conduct and any corrective action that's been taken by the supplier and the time that's elapsed since the incident itself. And there is a debarment list. So the Act mandates the creation of a central debarment list where suppliers that meet the exclusion criteria will be listed. Suppliers can only be added to that list following investigation of their status as excluded or excludable, and it will depend on the nature of grounds for their debarment. But one of the key aspects of the Act is its emphasis on transparency and national security, and it will require public bodies to publish notices related to suppliers' performance, contract changes, and instances where suppliers fail to perform satisfactorily. And additionally, suppliers may be excluded on the grounds of national security. But as is only right and proper, suppliers will have the right to appeal against debarment decisions or apply for removal from the debarment list if there is significant new information or a material change in circumstances. And the Act also requires suppliers to act properly in procurement processes, so improper behaviour, which will cover things like providing misleading information or unduly influencing decision making that might also lead to exclusion in the future. So the central digital platform, my very personal opinion is it feels like it could be one of the more transformational elements actually of the Procurement Act. So it's likely to be an expansion on Contracts Finder. It will use the Open Contracting Data Standard. There is an intent for it to be in place from October 24 when the Act becomes live, but there is no firm date as yet for that. But what it will do is put information in all one place. So pipelines, for example, will be in one place where suppliers can go have a look at it. Contracts registers will be, the supplier performance information will be there. And what suppliers will be able to do is register centrally and complete the standard selection questionnaire centrally, which then should be able to be pulled through into the individual procurement competitions that contracting authorities are running. Quite how that information will pull through to the portals, we're not sure yet. That's one of the areas that we hope to see more information the closer we get to October. But what that means is it's a central information repository, but also it will kind of act as certainly for selection questionnaire element, it will act a little bit as a pre-qualification. So suppliers won't have to fill out that selection questionnaire every time they apply for a procurement. Anything you wanted to add to that, Anna, before I move on to dynamic markets and frameworks?
No, I think you covered it pretty well, Jill. There is so many unknowns with the single digital platform at the moment. So people have only vague idea of how it's going to work. So yeah.
But it should be, as Contract Finder is trying to be, it should be at least one place where all the notices are, where all the pipelines are, where all the contract registers are. So at the minute where you have to go to each individual organisation's website to find out that information, it will at least be in one central place. And that completion of the standard selection questionnaire once, and that then pull through, and you just update that as and when there are any changes, it could be really transformational for suppliers for sure, and for buyers as well, because it needs to be.
Maybe just one more thing to add, Jill, just because we've popped a question previously, we asked if Contracts Finder is also going to be replaced by the central digital platform, and the initial response we got is the Contracts Finder is still going to be in existence, because the idea is that Contracts Finder is for under threshold procurement. So just in case someone wasn't aware that this is how the contract, this is the future of the Contracts Finder. It still has a future, basically.
Cool, thank you, Anna. Anything before we move on?
Yes, Jill, we've just had one come in. So can you please give some examples of what the organisations that this procurement covers?
So in terms of public sector organisations, do we think? So this will cover public sector organisations. So the NHS are likely to have some tweaks, and we had defence regulations, utility regulations before. It's likely that there will be some changes or differences for utilities and defence going forward, I would have thought as well. Anna, what do you think?
So NHS are going to apply something called like provider selection regime. So it's very light touch regulations, so to say. So NHS are going to have slightly different set of regulations that are going to be applicable to them. And the idea of the Procurement Act is that all those regimes that we have currently, so we have public contract regulations, we have utilities regulations, we have concessions regulations, and now all of those are under the Procurement Act. All those regimes have been combined. So all the authorities pretty much are going to have to abide by the new Procurement Act, apart from NHS. Like I said, they're going to have provided a supplier selection regime.
And it's fair to say, of the devolved administrations, England, Wales and Northern Ireland are picking up the Procurement Act 2023. Scotland is not. There will be some the knowledge drops that I'll get to in a second do try and lay out the devolved administrations and where there are, who's picking it up and what happens if you are a supplier to a Scottish public sector organisation and what that means to you. One of the things that we will do later in the year is look at what Scotland are doing specifically. So if you are a supplier or a Scottish authority, we will be getting to some more detail on that as well. Did I say another question?
Yeah, one more's just come in. So will this have any impact on the actual portals used? There are lots and some of them are more friendly, user-friendly than others.
Is it e-tendering portals? Sorry.
Yeah.
So it will have an impact on the portal, the new Procurement Act. So YP are the user of one of those portals. So we have been reassured that all the providers that are providing those e-tendering portals are having conversations with people responsible for developing the regulations, the central digital platform. So we at the moment we just need to wait and see how they're going to adapt those e-tendering portals, because there will be some degree of change. And it will be as simple as adjusting the workflows to reflect the new regulations, pretty much. We don't have anything solid yet. We don't know the actual changes, but we do know the workflows for procedures have to change, and the way the portal is talking to the central digital platform for the purpose of publishing all those new notices as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Anna. That's great.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
And there is one more. Are we answering that now, or?
Let's have a look. Let's leave that for now, and we'll try and pick that up at the end if that's all right. Oh.
Cool.
So in terms of dynamic markets and frameworks, we did run a session on this specifically, again supported by YPO, a couple of weeks ago. So if you want to have a listen to that, you can do so through our YouTube channel. So this is going to be really light touch, but one of the points to make for suppliers especially is that the regulations, public contracting regulations of 2015, frameworks and DPSs, the dynamic purchasing systems, can be let up until the end of September. And then from October, dynamic markets and the new types of frameworks will be in place. And what that really means is we'll have both things running concurrently for potentially up to 8 years. For suppliers, you then need to know about both types of product for the foreseeable future. So, and that's why the previous webinar might be important too, if you want to understand frameworks and dynamic purchasing systems in their current construct in a little bit more detail. But in essence, what the Procurement Act, it evolves dynamic purchasing systems into dynamic market. But they do act very similarly in that they're always open. So they enable new suppliers to join a dynamic market to bid for a specific opportunity. One big change is though, it's no longer just for common goods. It is for goods, works and services are now covered under the dynamic market. They're there to try and increase the range of competition throughout the life of a dynamic market, and there is no limit on the number of suppliers, which is particularly helpful for smaller organisations or smaller voluntary sector organisations. And they're not limited to a maximum term of 4 years as frameworks are at the minute. And that opening advertising means that suppliers that are not on the dynamic market would have the opportunity to join in the future to bid for a certain contract. Frameworks will continue as they are, or they can at least continue as they are, as in a closed framework for 4 years, but also they'll be permissible for up to 8 years in duration. But that comes with the provision that they are reopened for competition periodically. And so, for example, if a framework will be open for 8 years, they must be reopened at intervals of 3 and 5 years. And that marks a significant extension from the current maximum duration for closed frameworks, which is currently set at 4 years. That opening of the framework means that current providers on the framework can rebid. So if you've got more to offer or if your pricing has changed, you can rebid for that framework. And if you're a new provider, you can also bid to join that framework at the reopening points. And if there's an 8-year framework, that would be reopened at 2 points. So it is, again, to encourage more competition and more diversity in the supply chain. What we don't know at this point is what will be the most common products that buyers typically favour, whether frameworks will continue to be as popular as they are, as closed for 4 years, or whether the open frameworks will become more used, and whether, because a framework can last for 8 years with 2 reopen points, whether there'll be less dynamic markets used in favour of frameworks. It's a little bit impossible to know at this point, but there are some fundamental changes to those products, and we do expect there to be an impact of that. Anything question-wise on dynamic markets and frameworks before we continue, Lauren, or should we just have the questions at the end?
On mute. I think the questions are at the end at the minute.
Thank you. So in terms of impact on suppliers, what does it mean? So the Act is aiming at least to increase competition by making it easier for suppliers, including or especially for small to medium enterprises, to bid for contracts. And in practical terms, what that means is that buyers are not just duty bound to consider the barriers to entry and growth for small to medium enterprises, but to remove them. And there are some specific constructs around that. So if you require accreditations or insurances, for example, rather than asking for those to be in place at point of bid, the shift is to have those things to be in place at contract start, to level the playing bidding field, if that makes sense. And some thought will need to be given, I think, from buyers in terms of how long those things need to be able to be put in place. If you're asking for 27001, for example, which is the information assurance standard, or even Cyber Essentials Plus, they don't take 2 minutes necessarily to put in place. So thinking about contract start, implementation, mobilization, and when you need those products in place for will take some thought from contracting authorities. The Act, because as framework terms extend especially, the Act could therefore drive longer term relationships with suppliers to really allow organisations the benefit of time to get to know an organisation, and that should hopefully drive continuous improvement throughout the supply term. That performance tracking, I think it's easy to focus on the negatives of debarment and exclusion and excludable suppliers. However, for those suppliers who perform really well, and there are lots and lots of them, it can be a real benefit to suppliers because it is a matter for public record. It can help increase trust and repeat business, and it can help you demonstrate your performance very tangibly to prospective new clients. And the Act is really aiming to create new opportunities for SMEs. So there's a big drive for local supply, diversity in the supply chain, and the support of small to medium enterprises, and especially those in the small and micro end of that, to expand businesses and enter new markets. And that broader competition and more focus on SMEs means that there should be an opportunity for businesses to scale and build capacity and capability, both directly and indirectly, with the public sector through those tier 1 and below tier 2, tier 3 type of supply arrangements. In terms of strategies for SMEs, you can see some live links on the screen. So under the new Act, contracting authorities will have a duty to consider that the requirements that are being asked for are proportionate to the contract, that bidding times are realistic, including for businesses that don't have dedicated bidding teams. So that stuff about how do you remove barriers to entry for smaller organisations is a real duty under the Act. And there's a diverse representation of businesses in pre-market engagement to make sure that a contracting authority is reaching a wide range of suppliers. Our job in procurement is to inspire competition. And so the Act is really trying to prepare buyers and commissioners for exactly that, to inspire competition from the widest possible market. And that means things like visibility of pipelines will be really useful, although I think, Anna, and correct me if I'm wrong, the duty is 18 months outward look for opportunities over 2 million. And of course, lots of smaller organisations are dealing in a far smaller opportunities than that. So one of the things Go for Growth is doing just this afternoon, actually, with our clients, is thinking about what will pipeline management look like. So how do smaller organisations really begin to prepare for opportunities? But there'll be some duty on contracting authorities to really think about the bidding process and the timeliness of that. So we're not long from Christmas, and there were lots of public sector bids that went live just before the Christmas break to close just after the Christmas break, meaning that if you wanted to bid for it, if you were planning some leave at Christmas, that leave was now gone. So thinking about public holidays, when they drop, and what impact that has on your timescales becomes a duty in a different sense. So thinking about timescales, timeliness, proportionality and realisticness in terms of removing those barriers to entry is really important. Some advice that Go for Growth always gives is, I mean, there's tons of workshops and webinars running up to and beyond October on procurement reform. Not everybody can go to everything, obviously, but try and get to what you can. And if there are any mechanisms to prepare early for procurement competitions, and we'll talk a little bit about that from a Go for Growth perspective in a few seconds. And if you can start thinking about your social and environmental impact as early as possible, that will stand you in good stead as a supplier. There are knowledge drops. So there's 2 types of knowledge drops from the Cabinet Office. They're part 1, part 2, part 3 that you see underlined on the screen. They're live links. So when the slides come out to you, it will link you straight through to the knowledge drops. You can see on screen that it's 17 minutes long, And there are ones that are specifically for small to medium enterprises and voluntary community and social enterprises. And that's 15 minutes long. So they're not a huge burden in terms of time, but they are aiming to try and give you some information on what's happening with the Act and the changes that are coming and how to prepare for it. One of the things Go for Growth will aim to do is watch those knowledge drops and summarise the content. So if you want to keep an eye on our social platforms as well, please do feel free to. Anna, if I can ask you really briefly, if you could give us just a 1-minute overview of YPO and how YPO can help people get ready for the reform, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. So YPO were formed in 1974. One of the UK's largest public sector buying organisations. We are 100% publicly owned, and we with profits being returned to our public sector customers. We are owned by 13 members authorities and 71 associate member authorities. And in terms of routes to market, we have over 30,000 products and over 100 frameworks ready for our customers. So whether it's pens, paper, computer, furniture, or even things like electricity, food and insurance, we are basically trying to help our customers get the best deal around. Now, how to become a YPO supplier. So if you are interested in supplying to YPO, the best way is to register on our e-tendering portal, because we carry all our tendering activity through that portal, which is called Pro Contract. And if you set up your business classification, once opportunity becomes available, you will get a notification matching your business classification. Also, you can search for current opportunities which are open, and you are likely to find a lot of DPSs there because they're open throughout the entire duration. Also, if you register on that portal, YPO are not the only contracting authority using it, so you will have access to plenty more frameworks / contracts for other contracting authorities. Also check Find a Tender Service and Contracts Finder, because we have to publish notices in both of those portals when going out to tender. Also, have a look at YPO website and social media, because we tend to publish information about new and exciting opportunities in there, especially when they are brand new, unlike renewals. So yeah, I just cut it really short, just really conscious of time. You're on mute, Jill, I think.
I am. Sorry, schoolgirl error. YPO also, you have a meet the buyer process, don't you? Which you can book through the website if you want to talk to Anna in contracts or anyone in the category teams. You can go through their website and find the meet the buyer booking sessions. So please do use that. If you've not used Find a Tender Service or Contracts Finder, Lauren is running a session on finding opportunities on, Lauren, is it the 9th of February? I think.
I've got 13th of February.
13th of February. So if you are a supplier and you would like to have some more information on those portals and Find a Tender, Contracts Finder, etc., then you can join us. You can find that information through our website. Really whistle-stop tour of Go for Growth. So what do we do? What support is there? As I've just said, there's portal support. We will help you understand public sector processes, how to take part, and that means your process policy, reducing carbon, delivering social value, all of your basic needs for any sort of funding application, and that includes grants as well as contracts. And if you have been unsuccessful in the past, you can bring that feedback to us and we'll help you prepare for the next opportunity that you want to go for. And we do that through a number of ways. So we try and make it as individual as possible for providers. So we don't want you to wade through anyone else's treacle. You can come to us for one-to-one coaching. We have events like this, lots of workshops, training and guidance. We have an online learning platform. And we have something called the Public Sector Supply Ready Status, which allows you to sense check your readiness to take part in a public sector competition. It will help you complete the standard selection questionnaire, and it will ask in just 3 short steps for you to provide some evidence around some of the basic tools that you would need in your toolkit for any public sector competition. Everything that Go for Growth does is offered free of charge to providers, so there is no cost from Go for Growth to come and get the support. And it can be whether you're in procurement or whether you're in the supplier marketplace, it can often feel like a lonely place. So here's all our contact details. The YPO website is on there for you as well. And you can see a link to our public sector supplier ready accreditation. But mine and Lauren's contact details are on there. So if you do want to have a chat with us at any point, please do just give us a shout. And that will take us to questions. We are literally at time at 10:45. So I know we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A. Thanks, Anna. Your introduction was very helpful. So that's one of the comments in there, which is brilliant. Thank you very much. And there is a comment on in terms of as a small firm, we don't stand a chance. I know actually the reality has really been like that and felt like that. The Procurement Act is trying to address some of those discrepancies and disparities. It is trying to drive transparency, fairness, consistency, and it's really focusing on small to medium enterprises and removing those barriers to entry. So in that sense, the Procurement Act is a real positive. We do obviously need to see how it rolls itself out, but hopefully we'll see more and more work going to local, smaller organisations. And are there any specific advantages or considerations for smaller and locally based businesses that we should know about? I think it's around that central digital platform primarily. All the information that you need will be in one place, which it's really not like that today. You are looking at everybody's individual website. And again, I think that duty to not just consider the barriers to entry and growth for smaller organisations, but to make good on actual activities that remove those barriers so that the procurement is as accessible to as broader audience as possible will really stand smaller organisations in good stead. Go for Growth is running some bid skills lunch and learn sessions in March, which breaks down the bidding process and the contracting process into more detail. So if anybody would like to come along to those, have a look on our website. There's more information and booking details on there. But given we're at time and there's no more questions in the Q&A, I would just like to say thank you again to Anna for joining us from YPO. It was brilliant to have you here. You were a font of all knowledge. So having your expertise has been really useful. Thank you, Lauren, as ever, for keeping us on the straight and narrow with Q&A. If there are any more questions coming in that need answering, we'll answer them in the slide deck. And thank you to everybody who took time out to attend today. Hopefully my signal held okay and you managed to hear what we were saying. Thank you ever so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.